Welcome to the Managing the Smart Mind podcast with your host, Coach Kramer. This is episode 36, The Chameleon Complex. Well, hello, smart human. If you've listened to the previous podcast on over-optimizing, and by the way, if you haven't, go do that, seriously, then you know that I have been preparing in my beautiful, sort of crazy way for a road trip to northern Italy. And by the time this podcast is released, I'm on my way home from a tour of hopefully the best art, wine, food, all the things northern Italy has to offer. So good. And by the way, I feel like such an adult having this pre-recorded in time. But the topic we're tackling today, the Chameleon Complex, is something which also comes up during my foreign trips, albeit in a very non-problematic way. Because whenever I travel to a different country or even region, I love to try and blend in, speak at least a bit of the local language in a way that they can't tell from my accent, at least that I'm Dutch, to not stand out as a tourist so much, to eat at restaurants favored by locals, all the things, right? And I love to live under the illusion that I'm very successful at this. I try to blend in like a chameleon, which admittedly is a bit unrealistic if you have very blonde hair and you're not in a northern country, but still, right? And for me, this is part of the fun of traveling. When in Rome, do like the Romans, right? And there's absolutely nothing inherently wrong with this. For me personally, trying on a different language, culture, cuisine is part of the joy of travel. Now, because smart humans are extremely good at pattern recognition, they are usually able to pick up on what it takes to fit in with a certain culture, a group, or even to make a relationship successful very quickly. It's a very useful skill, a bit like the Matrix, right? Where Keanu Reeves gets all these chips inserted and then all of a sudden he's able to do martial arts, except you don't need the downloads, you don't need the hole in your head. And it can also be a very valuable coping mechanism when you're growing up in an environment that may not necessarily be friendly towards outsiders. Hello, bullies, right? But when you take this superpower you have too far, it can turn into a complex, which I have dubbed the Chameleon Complex. And that's what we're looking at today. So what is it? Well, if your smart mind habitually helps you to blend in any situation, then you're at risk of losing yourself. To use the chameleon metaphor, you're changing color so many times that you lose a sense of what your true colors are. So the problem isn't so much in knowing what to do to blend in, to fit in with a group, to be liked, approved of, or respected by other people. That's a great skill. It is in actually doing so without any boundaries that you start losing your sense of self. And here's an example of how this can show up. Let's say you make a new group of friends at university, for example, or at work, who all love to play board games. You like hanging out with them. They're smart and they're fun and they're kind. And in no time, thanks to the internet, you, who before knew nothing about board games, have become a board game expert and are able to chime in on most conversations. You get invited to more and more board game evenings and marathons. But then it starts to creep up on you. Much as you like your new friends, you don't really enjoy spending this much time playing board games. You actually start to dread invitations for games nights and weekends because you don't want to disappoint them by saying no, but you also want to do other things. And you may even feel a bit like a fraud because you're not being honest about your true board game feelings, right? And the same can happen around anything, any interest, activism, all the things. You decide to become a member of a club, right? You go all in only to realize later that maybe you're not as much into this as you thought in the first place. And if you have an ADHD brain, this will probably sound very familiar, but it also happens to smart non-ADHD brains quite often. And if this shows up in your personal relationships, it probably does at work too, right? You quickly figure out the rules of the game and you start playing them with great success. But you don't stop to ask yourself how you want to show up, what you enjoy, and what boundaries you want to set. So why is it a problem? Well, this sponge-like absorbing of new cultures, interests, etc., can lead you to lose the connection with your true self. There simply isn't room for it in your sort of fitting in, right? It doesn't enter the equation. And this results in not realizing what you do and don't like, not being aware of it, not even pursuing your own desires, and not setting proper boundaries. And if you keep this up for years, which actually sadly many people do, you will start to feel like a bit of a hollow shell, as if life has lost its luster and meaning. You have lost a connection with your authentic self by being such a chameleon, and that, in the long run, always is a problem. Okay, so how do you know you have a chameleon complex rather than just being good at fitting in, right? You may be wondering how to tell when your supreme skills of pattern recognition become a problem, when your chameleonism turns into a complex. Well, here are some signs. For example, you feel you can't be honest with people about what you do and don't like. When someone asks you what you like to do or eat or where you'd like to go, you have a very hard time coming up with an answer. And you'll usually say something like, oh, I don't care, right? Whatever you want to do. You feel disconnected from both yourself and others. You may have a hard time setting boundaries, saying no to requests and invitations, etc. And you regularly wonder what the point is of it all, if this is all there is. And in addition, as said before, you may even feel a bit like a fraud. You can also ask yourself, how many of the things I do I do because I really want to do them? Wow, that was a lot of do's in one sentence, but you know what I mean, right? And if the answer is not a lot, then you may be overdoing the chameleonism. Okay, so if that's the case, what can you do about it? Well, as usual, the first step is awareness. Start noticing when you click into your chameleon behavior. When, rather than noticing people's preferences and habits and then consciously deciding how to be around them, you automatically adjust to what you think they want to see, right? Start noticing that pattern, that behavior. And then once you're aware of when and how you do it, start getting curious. Do you have a good reason for this? Because you might, right? And if it's just an old habit, then you can simply decide to cut down on it, to try and do it less. But if there is a rationale behind it, for example, because it's your way to create safety to be in the world, then you want to dive into that. If it's safety you're trying to create, what other avenues can you explore to feel safe around other people? If it's approval you're after, in what ways can you start approving of yourself without needing to revert to other people, which is a bad place to be in anyway, right? How can you build your own confidence? And if you're disconnected from your own wants and needs, what steps can you take to reconnect? Now, don't fall into the trap of black and white thinking. And if you don't know what this is, there are 2 podcast episodes on this because so many smart people do fall into that trap. So check them out. So don't start thinking in absolutes. You don't need to radically stop adjusting all of a sudden and adapting and become this kind of aggressive boundary setter who says, no, I do not want to come to your party. Bye, right? Take small steps. For example, when someone makes a request, drop into your body, feel into it and notice how it feels. Does it feel good, bad, neutral? And then when you know, respond accordingly. And this takes time and practice, right? You may not always be able to do this, but the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And the more you will reconnect with your true identity. And then from there, of course, you can decide to change colors whenever it seems fun or smart. When you feel like playing Jason Bourne, for example. I wish I could now play the Jason Bourne tune, but they will probably sue me, so I won't. Okay, so chameleonism is awesome. It's a superpower. Don't take it too far. Embrace your gifts and use them for you rather than against you. I wish you an amazing week with lots of your own true colors. Bye-bye. Would you love to experience what it is like to be really free? I can help. DM me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook to learn how you can work with me, or send me an old-fashioned email on podcast@elsakramer.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Managing the Smart Mind podcast. I love that at the time of recording this, there are smart humans listening in 79 countries. Can you believe it? I really appreciate all of you. So do send me any questions or requests for topics you have. And if you enjoyed the podcast, I'd love for you to give it a 5-star review so other smart humans can find it. Thank you.